welcome to Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. I'm your podcast producer, RJ Malik. Joline, hello there. How are you doing today?
Well, I am good, and it's good to see you, RJ. It's good to be back here.
Always great to see you, and I see you have a guest. So I'm going to throw it to you. Intro your guest and tell us what you're going to be talking about.
Fabulous. So I am thrilled to have Lisa Parker with me today. And I'm especially moved in some ways because Lisa's one of my dearest, and I don't want to say oldest because but it's all wrong. But in terms of who began in our work together, you and I were early birds in the work that we do. And we didn't have a lot of company in those early days.
Right.
So I want to begin a little bit by giving anyone who's listening a chance to learn a little bit more about you. Wonder if you just tell us what you're doing and what you are talking about these days.
Sure. Well, I'm thrilled to be here with my like-minded friend. And, the way that we first met, I think, was through the family philanthropy world. And so I'll just give the listeners a little bit of background about how I got to where I am today in philanthropy. So my grandfather, Lawrence Welk, started a foundation in 1960. And back in those days, there was kind of no concept of family philanthropy. I don't think it was even a word. And the foundation operated like a lot of them of the day did. There's a patriarch, made his money in business or television or whatever it might be, got out the ledger a couple times a year with a trusted advisor and said, let's be very responsive. We got a request from the Boys and Girls Club. We got a request from, Parks and Rec to, clean the pool or whatever it was.
Right.
And so that's the way he gave. In 1980, there was a big fork in the road because he retired from the foundation and my mom took over. And at that point, she saw the opportunity to do two things with the foundation. One was to be more strategic with the giving, and two was to engage family. And so at this point, it was a family board, my mom and her two siblings. And I don't know how she got this hair in her head, but their generation invited my generation, the third generation, to be a junior board. And what that meant was that we got to go to their board meetings. And just to put this in context of next generation, I was 13 and I kind of fell smack dab in the middle of the 10 third generation members in terms of age. So we went to the full foundation board meeting. And then after the board meeting, we had our own little meeting and we got to bring issues that were relevant to our generation that weren't to our parents' generation. And so we got to talk about funding issues that were top of mind for the day. So, for example, the AIDS epidemic was just starting. We had a family member with special needs, and so we talked about giving to his school, and we got to bring projects that we felt really resonated with us, and we had 10% of the giving budget to do that.
Wow.
The beauty of this was that the board meetings, yes, there was a lot of boring stuff. But when it got to talking about the organizations, that was really fascinating. And I think one of the keys to us being engaged was that we were encouraged to participate. So much so that I don't think we really realized we didn't have a vote, but our opinions were really valued. At the time, we're told now that at that time we were the first documented junior board in the country. And so I would be invited to speak at philanthropy conferences, particularly about how you engage younger generations and how you do philanthropy together in a meaningful way across generations. What I heard over and over from attendees was, my kids aren't interested, my grandkids aren't interested, but they have this opportunity, to whom much is given, much is expected. This is a privilege. And all of that is true, but it was couched in guilt. And that is never a good motivator. Plus, it wasn't the experience we had. We really enjoyed what we were doing. And fast forward again, 1997, my mom retires and I become the president of the foundation. And we had a new opportunity to engage a new generation. And I want to tell this story because you influenced it so much, Joline. But 1997, my first child's born. I have all these books and manuals about what to expect in the first year, and there'll be these milestones for intellectual development and physical development. And I got to thinking, what are the milestones to look for going forward to nurture generosity and compassion and to make giving a language that they're familiar with and excited about. And I say giving is compassion in action. And I really was influenced by your book, Raising Financially Fit Kids, because you broke it down in terms of developmental stage, what financial lessons and windows are open at each stage. So for a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I'm talking a lot, so forgive me.
No, I am wrapped. So do
Okay.
not stop. Because you're also talking about the fact that you had this changing, evolving family, and you and I have had long conversations about resistance to change in family. And yet, boy, you've got a story to tell here, which is so unusual. And I don't want to interrupt your flow because it's a great story. But what do you think was going on that your grandfather retired and change was able to happen? I mean, he was, listen, I was a little girl and I was just watching him on TV as you were growing up, I'm sure. But I'm sure he was in many ways an archetypal patriarch because those were those days. And yet change was happening in your family. That doesn't always happen.
Right. And I will say the circumstance was that he was really beginning to experience the effects of Alzheimer's disease. And so this was really a change that was driven by my parents' generation. And, and who knows how he would have responded to that. I know that today he'd be thrilled. And I also consult with other families who have charitable foundations who really want to be intentional about engaging their kids and grandkids in a meaningful way. And that was just an idea that wasn't on the scene back in the 60s. And so how could he imagine that and implement that? It really was the impulse of my mother and her siblings. Yeah.
I mean, we both know your mother is a powerhouse and clearly has always been. I've not had this conversation with her. I suspect you have. What do you think was driving her? Because she probably wasn't involved as a young girl in the same way you had the opportunity for. What triggered that, do you think?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, she values family and legacy and passing down tradition. And it was she was trained as a journalist. So she's curious about everything and she wants to do her research. And so she went to the local chapter of grant makers in Los Angeles. She went to the, at the time, Council on Foundations to hear about what was most effective in engaging family. And so she got the idea to let's do this early. Let's do this with our kids because this is a bonding experience. And this is the best way for them to understand and embrace the values that our grandfather had and to connect to this history that we have together. And, I really.
It's so important that you went to this is a bonding rather than this is a giving opportunity.
Right. I mean, I think they were hand in hand.
Sure.
And, to be honest, if it weren't for the foundation, our family today would not be so close. And I'll tell you that in the fourth generation, there are 20 of them. So not only do I know my cousins well, but I know their children well. And that is the most special thing to me. And and I'll just continue the story a little bit for how we evolved for them, for the fourth generation. So, I got real curious, like I said, thanks to you, about how we can nurture the giving instinct in developmentally appropriate ways. So I did a lot of research into giving behavior, nurturing compassion and generosity among kids. And now there were 20 in the fourth generation that were my guinea pigs. So thinking about them learning about philanthropy in the boardroom, at 4, 5, 10 years old, that was not going to happen. And so we started a tradition that we call Cuzzapalooza. We get together every year. And in the past, it's been a long weekend. And we call it Cuzzapalooza. We get together, we do a couple of important things. One, we have fun. And, that's huge. That's one of the things I tell families is, you want to engage your kids and grandkids. And this is, philanthropy, serious business, but you got to have fun. That's what makes them want to come back. So we had bonding time, we had fun, but we also had a giving activity. So it was based on the age of the kids. Universally, the first cause is animals. So we did a trip to the wild animal park and learned about conservation. And, I could go on and on about this, but on through the years, we did developmentally appropriate, really fun giving projects because we wanted them to know that giving is service, it's raising money, it's giving money, and we wanted to expose them to a lot of different causes so they could figure out what they were most moved by.
Fascinating. So, did you and your mom go out looking for the causes? Did the kids volunteer them? How did you access the diversity of things they were looking at?
So, as I said, for my generation, we got to fund things that were not in the foundation's mission, which was children and families living in poverty, geographically limited to 3 areas. And early on, the kids figured out that if they gave internationally, their small bit of money would go much farther. And if there's time, I'll share an anecdote about that. So,
go for it. There's time. We'll just make time.
right. So, so then it was on me to help find some projects that would be of interest to them they had, in this particular year, $3,000 to give away. It sounds like such a small amount, but it doesn't matter the amount. But they decided to give $1,000 to 3 different NGOs across the globe working with children. And one of them was an organization called the Cambodian Children's Fund. And this was there's an incredible story behind its founding, which I won't go into, but the founder of the organization's a gentleman named Scott Neeson. He left Hollywood, a big fancy job, to go to Cambodia and start what is now the Cambodian Children's Fund. They house and educate the kids that had been scavenging on the dump. So $1,000, I write out the check and I write a note to Scott saying, I know this isn't a lot, but it comes with the great enthusiasm of these kids. And 3 weeks later, I got an email back saying, I know $1,000 doesn't seem like much in the West, but here's what we did with it. They, with the poorest village along the dump, they gave all the families new roofs for the rainy season, 10 pounds of rice, and new water tanks. So that was, I think, 40 families. And when I told the kids about it, they were just awed.
It's
And
transformational.
right.
Gosh.
And they got the taste of the helper's high and just the difference that they could make. That's a feeling you want to chase after you've had it for the first time. Yeah.
Even now, and this is, I'm sure, many years later, it's still an incredibly moving story because you're right, that helper's high just doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah.
When you look at kids who fall into the role of being bullies, you think that's so painful on some level. There's such meanness of spirit in that. How do you tap children to go to that other side and chase that other set of feelings? And I think starting early, obviously, is one of the secrets to that.
Right.
Wow. Fast forward, here you are. Those kids have grown up. Tell us something about, what happened to them. What are they up to these days?
Well, we still get together annually, and we're geographically dispersed.
Sure.
Those kids now make up the bulk of the foundation's board of directors. They have their own desire to want to participate, want to come to the family gatherings, and would say that it's the experience of giving together that has kept them close and connected to legacy. And we all want to be part of a clan, a group. This is how we evolved. And actually, studies find that when kids know their family story, it helps them understand that they are part of a important group, and that their stories of hardship and how relatives overcame those hardships, and they become more resilient. Actually, New York Times did a great article on this called "The Stories That Bind" several years ago. They found that there's 3 different family narratives. One is the success, amassing wealth, climbing the ladder, so to speak.
Right.
And then there's the one of losing it all. And then there's the third one, which they call the oscillating narrative. And that's where you understand in your family that there are a variety of experiences. There's successes and there's those failures. And when kids understand that oscillating narrative, they become more comfortable with the failures and challenges that are in their life, knowing that those that came before did it too.
Lisa, I missed that article, and I'm thinking, my God, what an important article that I missed.
I'll send it to
Now
you.
somebody listening is going to say, how do I get hold of that? Do you have the link? Can you send that to me?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, you're talking directly about resilience, obviously. And and every family that I've ever worked with longs to develop that in their family, but
Sure.
nobody gives lessons on that.
Yeah.
This is a pretty strong one. Um, I'm curious too. The another question, of course, that families always have is how do we teach governance? And I have to say, governance too can be taught in a way that's so boring you want to kill yourself.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like that came organically with your kids. Do they talk about? Do they have an approach to governance that is conscious for them?
Well, that's why it's been important for them to be a part of the foundation, is because they've learned from my generation and their grandparents' generation how critical governance is to the management of the foundation. And part of us, my generation being part of the board meetings, was we got to hear the jargon
Yeah.
around governance and begin to absorb the importance of that.
Yeah.
Another reason to start talking about these things really early on.
Yeah. We take for granted that so much of entrepreneurship and business gets shared around the dinner table. That's kind of one of those
Mhm.
epic stories that everybody hears. But the same thing obviously happens around the philanthropic table.
Yes.
And anytime you bring people to any table, it seems to me you're building community. I mean, here in my little village in Maine, when I first got here, pre-COVID, actually, people weren't doing, I mean, there were neighbors, but they weren't doing dinner parties. And I started inviting people for dinner parties. I was a bit of an oddity in doing that. Um, but listening to you, I think, we all need to just go with our gut and invite people to sit at the table and do things together.
Right.
Because what comes of that, the generation, the generativity, the creativity is so satisfying.
Yeah.
It's just a growth experience in some ways. I think of your mom so often. Uh, Women of her generation were not encouraged to be generative, frankly. Uh,
Mhm.
they had a role they were supposed to play. She has been, as you are, full of initiative and seems to have been all of her life. Do you think there was some secret sauce in her growing up, or was it just her own oddity that brought those things to the front? Because I know people are going to be listening and saying, how do I encourage or how do I spark my children to get started?
Right. Right. I think that in her generation, many women uh, heard about what their fathers or grandfathers were doing
Yeah.
and wanted to claim that in their own lives as
Mhm.
they grew up. Um, in terms of how can families, I think your question was, how do families start that instinct
Yeah.
early on? Um, Again, I'm a one-trick pony, but I think that philanthropy is an incredible way to start. Um, in terms of what we know, there's another great poll I'm going to send you from the Pearson Foundation. They polled parents on how they were able to raise giving teens, ages 13 to 18. And there were a few key things that stood out. One was reading to them,
Ah, yes.
reading early and reading stories of generosity and compassion. And my mom is 93 and an avid reader. And we, treasured, I think all parents treasure that special time reading with your kids. The other thing was that the families of the teen givers started early talking about the difference they could make. And these teens were given responsibility, jobs. They had jobs, they had responsibilities to help neighbors. And that was just a part of my mom's generation growing up. They had a lot of responsibility for making the world a better place, or making their community or their neighborhood a better place. And part of that is what you're talking about, is people gathering and connecting.
Yep. Yep. So, you describe yourself as a one-trick pony, which of course is not true. But you do remind me, another guest I have coming up is a guy named Doug Dreyer, who feels as strongly about the possibilities of teaching kids how to be collectors, whether it's of books or pens or Superman novelties or whatever.
Oh, how cool.
It's very cool. And he grew up with a dad who taught him about collecting, and he's brought his own kids into it. And, he pulls lots of lessons out of it in the same way that you describe pulling out of philanthropy. And as I think about what you're talking about, I think, at the heart of this, there is that enthusiasm for life, that passion and curiosity. You used that word earlier too. Just throwing ourselves into life in some way, I think, is the model we want to give our kids.
Right.
And not everybody has the inner capacity to do that.
Right.
And I know in families, one of the challenges is you have, people, I use this word loosely because I don't mean on a spectrum in terms of brain development. I really mean you have people who are just kind of gloomy by nature, and those who are much more upbeat. But I think about how, as family members, aunts and uncles and grandparents, we all have a responsibility to encourage and nurture that enthusiasm that you're talking about. I'm curious if you're aware of the role aunts and uncles played in the life of the family at all.
That's a great question. I think that it was the similar desire to nurture the understanding of legacy. Certainly in their own families, they encouraged giving back. I want to, Joline, pick up on something you just said.
Please.
About, there's some who have a more gloomy nature. We're talking about something really encouraging and positive and uplifting. Right. The fact of the matter is that depression and anxiety are off the charts. The pandemic did not help. However, we know that in some of the programs for teens that are struggling, one of the prescriptions is volunteerism, or doing, a good deed for somebody. And I think that that's obviously one of the great ways, like you said, to throw yourself into life and engage. That's not possible when you are weighed down by these very serious issues we have. But little steps in that direction can also be healing.
Right. Well, and the reading too, you really sort of caught my own heart there, because my mother was a great reader to her children. And it sounds like you also are familiar with the work of Marianne Wolfe, who wrote Reader Come Home.
I'm not, but you're going to have to share that one with me.
Oh, no, it's a great, it's a trade of resources here. So I'll send you that link if you'll send me the New York Times article.
Yes.
She is a neuroscientist and has studied and written extensively about the power of reading to children and what that does to brain development.
Wow.
And I have to say, at Bounce, we've made a very conscious decision not to get children on devices. We're only going analog with the materials we give them, in part because of what you're talking about.
Right.
So, oh my gosh, you and I could go on for 3 or 4 hours here. And I see that RJ has just come on to make his presence felt. Lisa, I think you and I need to do another hour on another podcast, because this is such rich storytelling material. And I know families long to have the experience you have. And it seems, particularly if they're walking around a little gloomier and sadder, they don't know how to get started.
Yeah.
And I think the small healing steps, that would be a great place to start another conversation.
I would so value that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So, okay, RJ, I know we're supposed to be, reeling down now. Time flies sometimes.
Oh my gosh. And I just talk too much.
No. It was fascinating. It was very, very well. I enjoyed listening to it.
Okay, good.
If I didn't have my timer going, I would never have known how much time went. So, but what I do need, how about some contact information? Start with Lisa.
Okay. So my website is FamilyCircleAdvisors.com.
Sounds good.
And Joline, your contact info.
www.bounce-10.com and at Joline, Joline, at bounce-10.com.
Sounds good. And again, it was a fascinating conversation between the both of you. I enjoyed eavesdropping, and I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy listening, and looking forward to your next podcast, Joline. And thank you for listening to today's Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with friends and family. Until our next podcast, for Joline Godfrey, I'm RJ Malik.
Thank you for listening to Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey. To learn more, visit www.bounce-10.com, and don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bounce 10. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional therapeutic advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or qualified therapeutic providers with any questions you have regarding investments or therapy.